Hello, I'm Annie Feighery. I'm the CEO of mWater, and I'm going to talk to you today about government-led data systems. We're talking today about the context of SDG 6 and fragile states. mWater has a free user base in 191 countries. Most of those are users that work without a relationship to us, but we also work specifically with governments to make local and national monitoring systems. We've done that in 32 countries. Most of those are fragile states, and I'm going to be speaking with you today about that user experience. When we talk about monitoring SDG 6, we're really talking about a specific part of what mWater calls the data cycle, that is the generate stage. Most of our stakeholders care about generating data that can be used to measure SDG 6. But that data itself is created with government-led management systems. And so that's actually where we're going to begin. When you think about your own work, please think about for a moment, how could you indicatorize it to make it show up in the SDGs? And that's a bit of a struggle. When it comes to SDG 6, indicatorizing that work begins with frontline water service providers. What are government-led management systems? Let me just read it to you very specifically. It's a data workflow that begins with a data entry tool that is used by frontline workers and ends with real-time data in a relational database that offers visualizations, reporting, and analysis opportunities. A few details about that database. It's owned by the government. The data is sovereign data. Also, it's not usually just one database. In the case of the Ugandan government, they have 14 databases that are used across the MWE to do the job. This isn't unusual. Think about how you do your job in your office in any sector. We have multiple software platforms that are used together to do our jobs. What are not government-led management systems? These are systems that you might be hearing of that NGOs build or donors run. These are donor-facing tools that help them make decisions about how to best achieve SDGs. These are not repositories of CSV files, donated or scraped data that are kept by donors and verified by donors. And most of all, this is not data systems with mandatory open data requirements. We all really hope that governments feel safe enough to make their data transparently visible to the world, but that has to be the decision of governments. After all, they are the owners of the sovereign data. Collectively, all of these tools run the danger of being overused as neocolonialist approaches to data. They are extractive in nature. They don't contribute to the government first and most. We're going to talk about this in a moment. Where data management happens in governments is a really important thing to visualize and to identify. It begins with collecting data. Frontline data workers conduct management, conduct monitoring visits, pump mechanics do preventative maintenance or maintenance. People who are working on assets, it might be mapping the chlorine residual or checking how much inflow there is to the system. All of these activities happen with forms in the form of surveys and checklists that digitally track this work. They're digital relics of the work. At least 90% of the data that fuels a government-led data management system happens by making digital infrastructure relics of the work of frontline data workers. Then the next level is managers. Managers see this data come in, they clean it, they might reject it and ask for it to be filled out again. These are the bottlenecks where local data is checked in an approval stage before it becomes visible in a national MIS. The management level where the data is processed is also a triage level where the managers can immediately respond to any emergent issues in local water systems. The next level is analysis. And here's where the vast majority of the people that are attending this call today do their work. Stakeholders in the NGO and donor communities work together with governments to make indicatorized reports in the form of dashboards, charts, maps that show high-level results of the data. Are non-revenue water down? Are fees collected up? And how is access? These are indicators that together bring the frontline data workers' work into visible levels of how are we doing as a sector. We hope we're sharing that in the next step in collaborative environments with live data. If we take the data offline and turn it into PDFs that are emailed, it begins to decay as dead data the moment we've done so. So if we share URLs of dashboards, we're continuing to make decisions and have discussions about live data. The final step is where the secret sauce of all of this lays, and that is the governments use the data. In our model, we ask for a plan for local, regional, and national offices and their teams to meet once a month and discuss over these dashboards to talk about why is non-revenue water down right now? What did we do right? What can we keep doing? These discussions lead to a culture of data-driven management, and that's where transformational change happens for governments. Let me show you how this is happening in the real world right now. This is RUMIS. This is a system that we're building right now for the government of Uganda. They're a really strong partner in modernizing their data management process. Let's see the district of Lira fully just remapped live data in the water atlas. We can open a water point and see where it is. We can see its status visible in a photo. Is it functional? It should be visibly so. We can see any forms that have been collected against it. These might be drilling logs, water user committee forms. And in this case, this is Form 1. This is the bread and butter of Uganda's monitoring process that's available for anyone that has a user account in the national government can see. Let's look at how the umbrellas look. This is water asset management in RUMIS. Very similar. You see that every water system has a site page, and every asset within that water system has a page that very similar, has its Form 2 filled out, has photos demonstrating its status. The photos are also really helpful if repairs are needed to have the right parts as you go out to begin the repair. You have child assets and parent assets that are all visible in the system. So the point of that is that governments are doing a great job overall. We've seen amazing progress in national governments taking up government-led management systems, but there are threats to this. First of all, a decade ago, when I was working on helping build the momentum towards government-led management systems, we always heard about appropriate technology. These were buzzwords that meant like sometimes the right technology is a pencil. And now that we've proven that every office in a fragile government does need a computer and every pocket needs a smartphone, we're starting to hear this verifiable data be the new version of it. And it's an excuse that people bring forward to say maybe the donors need to be in charge of their data. This is a threat to governments owning and running their own data systems. Second, we hear that maybe the private sector and the NGOs need to be in charge of the systems. But I'll tell you that no institution has ever scaled safely managed water to the national level except for governments. We think that private sectors and NGOs have an important role to play of supporting governments to add features and add functionality, but the government needs to be in charge of their own data systems. Third, let's talk about extractive data. This is like jewels in a mine that are taken out of the country. If you're going to prevent extractive data practices, you need to make sure that every data collection event involves the government's indicators so that that data can be handed over to contribute to the government systems, and that includes academic research. And finally, emergencies. Let's talk about emergencies. They're sometimes an opportunity for bringing momentum and funding into the government for better data management systems, but they're also sometimes a chance for NGOs, like we're seeing in Colorado right now, to say, we have a better data management system. We can't be bothered to share with the government. This is an emergency. And we think this is an opportunity for real policy change. Speaking of emergencies, let's talk about a very hopeful example. When the big earthquake in Haiti happened in 2012, NGOs and the cluster response came in and took control of the wash sector for several years. When the big earthquake happened, very similar in size 2 years ago, very different leadership was in place, and it was 5 years into them running a national monitoring system of their own based on the mWater platform. The director at the time, Director Miriam Dufel, was the person in charge when the earthquake happened. That same day, she was able to send out surveys to her staff and to NGOs saying, go take photos of the infrastructure, tell me what's happened, fill out the survey to say what's damaged. By the end of the day, she was already collaborating with stakeholders to say what could be made better. The cluster response did bring her another impact assessment approach 5 days later, and she was able to hand them her own results and say, here are my results. Here's what's important, and the government's going to be an important part of this recovery. And they were, and it was a very successful emergency recovery. It is my pleasure to introduce Miriam as our next speaker today, and she's going to tell you about Haiti and their important job running a government-led national data system in a fragile state. Thank you so much.